Hi, and welcome to the HNL Studios Hawaii Wedding Podcast. And on today's episode, we're focusing on wedding stationery, and we invited a local wedding stationer to share some insights with us. And it was a really, really fun conversation. Charles, what do you think of today's podcast?
Yeah, today we had on Melissa Myers, and she's been a virtual friend of mine for like 2 years over this COVID period. So it was great to have her on our podcast and just kind of talk about her, I guess, the services that she offers and her passion with being able to create, artwork for couples on their special day. I learned a lot, definitely, as far as what type of things that you can actually do with somebody that does stationery and the type of offerings they have. It was really good.
Yeah, that's true. There are even some things that I didn't know wedding stationers do, which I felt was really interesting. And especially hearing about her story and how she went on this journey of being a wedding stationer was very, very interesting. And I believe it's really going to be super helpful for our couples. And so I think we can go ahead and go straight to the podcast, to the interview. And then, if you end up liking this episode, just click on the like and subscribe button. Can you tell us about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Melissa Meyer. So I'm a wedding stationer, but I wasn't always an artist. I actually am trained as a pastry chef, so it was still artistry, but just with a different medium. So I went to school for that, and I was a pastry chef instructor at a culinary school, so I've taught people how to do that. And then I had my son, and I just, like all new moms, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have the time to do this kind of stuff anymore. And I was at home and trying to fit in baking and, sitting down and would do the elaborate, piped cookies and everything. And it was just like, oh, every time I work on that, I'm taking time away from him and felt guilty about it. And then, so I thought that it would ease up, as he gets older and he's going to get more into other things or go to school and whatnot. And then we found out that he's actually autistic. So he's diagnosed with autism. And once that happened, I realized my time is always going to be more needed on his side than it is on the work side. I'm not going to be able to get back into a kitchen and be on my feet for 10 to 12 hours a day and then come home and give him everything he needs. So I essentially just stopped baking for a living. And I found during that time that I still needed a creative outlet. So I turned to my iPad and I started designing on there. And I knew already that I loved being in the wedding industry because when I was a pastry chef, even though I was teaching at a culinary school, I was running a business on the side as well to make elaborate dessert tables and wedding cakes. And I realized that everything started with a sketch anyhow. I was still designing and sometimes I sketched right on cakes. So it's really a transition of a medium for me, but I just had to think through, I really want to do the illustration thing, but where can I fit it into something that works for me and where can I fit it ideally into the wedding industry? And so wedding stationery just made sense to me. So, I primarily focus on making stationery that has illustrations with it. So a lot of venue illustrations, which here, as soon as I moved here, it was like I got just inspired by the islands, started drawing the islands. We were staying in Lanikai, right across the Mokulua Islands, and so I just started sketching the islands, and I realized that's where it's at for me. So a lot of my stationery actually has those kind of designs in it, which is really cool for people who are coming here to get married here, to have something that's really unique that you're not going to find on the online venue platforms. So it just took off from there.
Wow. Oh, when did you start? I mean, you mentioned pastry chef and then you moved here. When was this?
So yeah, it's a weird timeline because I was a pastry chef in Florida. I had my son in 2016, and right after I had him, we actually moved to England. So we were there for a few years, and so that's when it was in the transition of still trying to bake, and then realized, turning to my iPad to design instead. So it was about 2017 that I got my iPad and started designing from there. Started building the business in 2018 because I knew I was going to be moving here and wanted to have everything in place before that. moved here at the end of 2019, and then everything is history from there with the pandemic.
Wow.
So, like I said, I was just getting my feet wet in the industry here, just meeting people, just doing styled shoots and whatnot, getting my first orders, and then everything shut down. So I've been designing since then and, building things since then, but just, waiting for things to get back to normal.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, so I definitely like related to wedding stationery. Um, when thinking of it, people usually think immediately of wedding invitations.
We could help make the logo for you, and then you send it off to whoever your lighting person is, or, your entertainment company that can help you with that to make it, any detail that you want turn into reality from the artwork there.
Oh, that's actually a lot.
Yeah. There's a lot of different things we could do.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's something that a lot of people probably don't know, because sometimes it's usually the save the dates, the invitations, the escort cards, and yeah, that's definitely great information, since I'm sure like a lot of people have gone through like that process of looking at Etsy. Have
Yeah.
you encountered like those situations?
Yeah, like a lot of situations that you get. I mean, people, obviously there's the big elephant in the room that there's a lot of online retailers. So that comes into play. Like if you just think you need invitations, right? That's all you're thinking of, invitations and response cards, and that's all you're going to get, as opposed to going with somebody and working with an artist specifically and finding something that's unique for you. And yes, Etsy, but you could spend forever searching on Etsy, and Pinterest is the other one, right? You could spend forever looking at Pinterest,
Yeah,
and then
Pinterest.
come up with a lot of great ideas. But a lot of those great ideas stem from styled shoots where money is not an issue, right? So you're getting all the best printing styles, all the inclusions of everything. So there's just some caution that needs to be done in there. It's a great starting point to figure out what you like, and then take those ideas to somebody to turn it into something that works for you and your budget.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then, I guess another thing that couples usually aren't sure of, because there are a lot of parts of the wedding planning process that seem pretty obvious, like getting your venue, getting your date. But when do you think couples should ideally start planning and shopping for their wedding stationery?
Yeah, so obviously if it's a save the date, I would say just start as soon as you know your date, which a lot of people just pick a date out of the blue, right? They like a certain date, or maybe it was their dating anniversary and they want that date. But really, it should be when you line up the date with your venues, so that you know that it is actually available and that you don't need to change from there.
Yeah.
So as soon as you have your date lined up is when you should start with your save the dates, especially if it's going to be somewhere like Hawaii, and a lot of people have to travel to that location. They're going to need time to plan their trip. So the earlier you can do it, the better. And then as far as invitations, I would recommend about 6 to 8 months out. Which a lot of people don't realize it is a process to go through, because there's the whole design process, which could take, up to 8 weeks in design if there's no revisions. And then you need to send your invitations out about 6 to 8 weeks ahead of time, if they're all domestic, so that people have time to get it, send it back to you. They have to send the response card back, because a lot of your vendors, especially the venue or the caterers, are going to need to have final numbers about 3 weeks ahead of time. So it's just good to have the extra wiggle room, especially, throughout the last couple of years with COVID. There's been a lot of times where like the mail has slowed down, or, different resources were limited, right? They couldn't get things to people as quickly, especially around Christmas time last year. So it's just good to have that extra wiggle room. So I would say 6 to 8 months.
Oh, 6 to 8 months. Yeah, that does make sense. And then, so as far as planning and shopping for their wedding stationery, how do you think, how should couples start, especially if they don't know where to look?
Yeah, so I think it doesn't hurt to start with a theme. And a theme isn't necessarily like, like a prom theme or anything like Under the Sea, but just like the feel that you want for your wedding, whether you're going for something that's luxurious or boho or like outdoor, you could just start with something simple like that and think in terms of that, because then you can think of the colors you would like to incorporate from there or the elements that you would like to incorporate from there, like which type of paper feels right. Or which printing style feels right to showcase your wedding. And then, from there, it's really just thinking through what elements are important to you. Obviously, to a lot of people, stationery doesn't sound like it's a really important thing. People think about the dress, people think about the cake, the venue, obviously. But when you really think about it, stationery is the very first impression that your guests are going to see of your wedding. So it sets the whole tone for your wedding. And then from there, a lot of people don't think about mail that they get so much about keeping it, but to those guests who are really important to you, like your grandma or your parents or your cousins and whatnot, this is the memento of your wedding that they're keeping. Like I've gone to houses where I've seen invitations hung on the refrigerator, or it's just something that they keep forever, even way after the wedding. So it's a detail that's pretty important because people are going to hold on to it. So if it's a good reflection of what your wedding is, then, it's really a special thing at that point.
Yeah, that's true. I still keep like the invitations of friends who got married.
Yeah, definitely. It's an exciting thing. And it gets people really excited.
I have a couple as well in my fridge.
Oh.
For sure.
Yeah, and I still actually have copies of my own wedding invitation, so I think it's really also nice to look back on it.
Yeah, you want to hear something funny about my wedding invitation? I actually made my own. So looking back on it, it's hilarious to me because I ended up being the DIY bride because I ended up doing a destination wedding. And I was like, I'm only inviting like 15 people. So I made my own. And like, I think back on it now and like roll my eyes and I'm like, this is so ridiculous. Like, obviously, I liked it at the time, and it was pretty at the time, but if I looked at it now, I'd be like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? So at least I can say that was the very first invitation that I made. But that's come a long way.
But I think also from a design standpoint, you kind of feel like you kind of feel like I can make my own.
Yeah.
Like, is that something that you feel?
But it's like, it ends up being crafty as opposed to professional, right?
Yeah. Yeah, especially when you try to do calligraphy and all those other illustrations, it can get really, really difficult.
Yeah,
and
listen,
it definitely
hire a calligrapher. Absolutely, hire a calligrapher. But yeah, illustration.
Is that something that you do as well?
I don't.
Or is it
I don't do
illustration?
calligraphy. So I use fonts and I scout for different fonts. And some of them, have that calligraphy look, have the handwritten look, but I don't do my own. So. As far as printing invitations, we can make it look like the best calligraphy in the world. But if you want it on your envelope, you could still print your envelopes. But I would recommend that people work with the calligrapher if they want that look to it. Yeah. So you could just take the envelopes straight to them and have them do that part.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially with the envelopes. Sometimes it kind of gets obvious when it's a font. Yeah, as opposed to something that's really hand calligraphy.
Yeah, and especially if people are outsourcing their printing or if they're buying from the online retailers, there's only so many fonts that they'll use and they're all really standardized. So it's like the ones that everybody's seen before,
Yeah. And then, and when you think of like couples who are starting to plan their wedding and are thinking of wedding stationery. You mentioned like planning ahead, making sure that the timeline is okay, and then thinking of a theme. But what other tips do you have to help them effectively plan it out?
Yeah, so I feel like most people, when they first start looking into their stationery, they have absolutely no idea what they want. So, like I kind of mentioned before, Pinterest is a good place to start. And in starting, I say like build a board and find things that you like. But I would specifically, take note on what elements you like on those items, whether it's the color or how you like that font looks curvy as opposed to straight lines, or whether you like that it looks dainty or has illustrations or like whatever the element is, as opposed to being like, I love this exact suite, and maybe you do love that exact suite.
Yeah.
But it's hard to take a suite to somebody and say, I want this, because somebody else created it. It's a different artist. So in that case, you should work with the artist of the art that you like. But the other thing is, like I said before, a lot of those things were created for styled shoots in the wedding industry. So they go over the top, and before you know it, you're looking at a $40 suite that you like per person. And it's like, that's not what you wanted to spend. So, cause they're not going to hold back on the shoots. So they're going to use their best things and show their best details, because that's marketing for them. So you want to make sure that you're just looking into the elements that you like, and maybe have some ideas in mind and say, well, I like this element, but I'm also open to this other one, because from there you can take it to a stationer. And I would suggest that as the next step, is to set up an appointment with a stationer or an artist and have them, take your ideas to them and say, these are the elements I really like. And here is a whole bunch about my wedding. Tell them about your venue. Tell them what you have in mind for it, because they can take those, take those two different thoughts, what you've seen that you like and what you want to have happen at your wedding, and turn it into your own unique artwork for your invitations from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's great.
I have a quick question. Yeah, so for when you're starting to talk to your clients who don't know, really where to start, do you feel like it's part of your process when you get a client to have them go to Pinterest? Like, is that something that you kind of ask them to do, or how does that work exactly for you?
Yeah,
once
absolutely.
You have a client that wants to work with you?
I've asked them to go to Pinterest and then build a board, and we can actually work on the board together so that I can see the things that they're putting into there. And from there, I can see what they're looking at, and also add pins so that they can, see some more ideas along those lines. And especially if they're putting notes on there, like, I like this specific element of it, can help get them into a better direction. And that's really helpful if there's time in between, when we book the appointment, when we actually have the appointment. And then from there, I could show them things that I've done relating to those elements that they liked, or, the ideas that I've come up with based on those elements and what I know about their wedding from there.
Wow. That's amazing. And then as far as wedding stationery is concerned, what do you think is the difference between the full custom suites that that usually stationers make, and then because you see a lot of pre-made designs on Etsy, you see a lot of pre-made designs even on maybe like Fiverr or those kinds of websites. What do you think are the differences between those, and what would you say to couples who are having trouble choosing between these easier like pre-made designs and the custom ones?
100%. Let your budget be your guide, right? You have to stay within your budget with your wedding, and I'm a big believer in that. So that being said, it doesn't necessarily mean just go get a pre-made design. First of all, if it's the ones where like you're just buying the elements on like Creative Market or something and making all the elements yourself, I would say stay away from doing that. Like, don't do it unless you have, unless you're a graphic designer and you really want to take pride in making your own wedding stationery. But otherwise, with the pre-made designs, I would say which element needs to be pre-made, and from there, what can I do that's custom that really makes it unique to me? Because if you're doing pre-made, that's fine, but you're going to end up with run-of-the-mill kind of thing. And like we said, this is like the introduction to your wedding. It's like the piece that people are going to hold on to. Something about it should be really special and really unique to you, because you have your one wedding day. This is the one day that you can spoil yourself or make it all about you, right? So maybe you decide to do like a pre-made design for the invitation or for the response card. The response card is a pretty standard thing that people can do pre-made for. But then you can add elements that are unique to you. Maybe you have like a crest made with your initials that has like illustrations that relate to you and your partner. Or maybe you do the pre-made design for the invitation, and then you have a custom timeline with illustrations that relate specifically to your actual event. Those are really good ways to combine the two where you're still saving on budget. So it's not completely custom, but you have custom elements to you. And then another element I would say is really look into your printing method. A lot of people, especially when they're, looking at Pinterest and things, they see letterpress. Letterpress is gorgeous, and it imprints the fonts or the design right into the paper. But it's also really, really expensive because of that. They have to create a plate of your design, and your designs have to be done, on the technical side, they have to be done in vector. So your artist has to know how to do that. If it's somebody maybe from Etsy, maybe they don't know how to. So you're paying for more skill there. Then you're paying for more skill from the printer. It's a longer process in the first place. So maybe instead of doing that, you can have a really beautiful digitally printed design, which is the cheapest method, but can still look really nice if you pair it with the right paper. So maybe it's just like getting the texture from the paper instead of getting it from the actual printing method, and reduce your costs from there. So there's lots of ways to control the budget so that you can still get custom. And that's why I would recommend working with a stationer or an artist of some sort, so that they can help guide you in that, so that you're not just like, oh, I'm going to have to go buy my invitations online. It's the same thing I've seen before, or mine's a little different because the color is a little different, but it'll still be really unique to you and really special to you that way.
Can you give us an example of like something that was really special or unique that you made for a couple, just like maybe like a past client, like what would make somebody, because I guess for me, like I'm trying to understand, like, or trying to picture what something unique would be for me. Like, can you kind of walk us through like an example that you've done?
Really unique, really personal. A lot of people love their pets, and understandably so. I love my pets too, but like especially dog owners, they want their dogs included in the stationery.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes, they find a way to have their dog drawn. So that either like it could be really subtle, like in the crest, like maybe have a bunch of different elements. I've had people have like where they met included in there, leading to like where they're getting married kind of thing. But even like on the envelope, like you open it up, there's an envelope liner, which is a great place to put artwork, but it's like, hey, your dog's greeting everyone. So that would be super personal. What I like to do a lot, especially here, because everything's so beautiful here, is just use the island or use the venues here on the island as the special personal touch. If people, don't really have any ideas, but they know where their venue is and they really love that, to use that like as the envelope liner when they see it. I've done a bunch of different illustrations from different places on the island. So sometimes they're on the invitation themselves, sometimes they're the envelope liner, and sometimes they're coordinating with the map, different invitation on there.
Wow, sounds great. But as far as like basically the stationery is concerned, do you believe as well that, because I know like other people just think that, like you mentioned earlier, some couples just have this mindset that they don't have enough of that budget, so they'll go with something that's run of the mill, that's pre-made, that's just a PSD template that they'll download and then that they can edit. But as far as wedding stationers are concerned, is it possible to like create elements, like maybe just the invitation card, at least have that custom made, and then they can just create the other elements or create the other elements on their own and DIY it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that something
so it's
that
not
you feel is possible?
It's not necessarily like a package that you have to get where everything's included, like all or nothing. You can just get the invitations or just get certain elements made to pair with other things, and that's fine. I've had people say, well, I'm going to get, I really found this one map that I like on Etsy. Etsy keeps coming up. I found this map that I like on Etsy, so I'm going to get that from there, but I want to get these other elements from you, and that's completely fine. So whatever works for you, take the method that works for you, but just try to include something that's unique to you and different to you.
And then I kind of like a random question, but do you have like a favorite design that you've created? as far as your experience in invitations is concerned?
I got to be really honest. I have a stack of my previous invitations and it's in my closet, and every now and then I just look through them because they're so pretty. But I'm not saying that because, like, I'm trying to brag on myself. I'm saying that out of extreme modesty of, like, still being really in awe that I can do this. Um, so it's just, I think all the ones that are a drawing of somewhere here on the island always end up being my favorite. And I have like two different styles that I do with that. So either full color, where it looks like the actual, like scenery, or line art, where it's just like the outline of the scenery. And I love them both like equally, even though they look like two totally different styles. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to pick. I've done just like different places, like the North Shore over in Kailua. I think the Kailua one might be my favorite, but I'm always designing different things, so it's like always changing a little bit. But yeah, I just love going back and looking at those, and I just think they're so beautiful.
Wow, that's amazing. And wow. So just as far as the design process is concerned, you mentioned like illustrated elements. Do you hand draw them, or do
Yeah,
you use
everything
like
I
your
make.
iPad to create them? I guess. Yeah.
No, every single thing I make, I hand draw it on my iPad, I should say that. So everything is sketched from the start, all by hand. I don't take any graphics from anywhere. I don't buy any graphics from anywhere. So everything I do is completely custom. So obviously, if I were to make something and then show it to a client and they want a revision done, it's going to add time to the process, because it does take time to create the artwork. And some things are already created and people like it, but they just want it in a different color. So when it comes to like line art or certain things like that, it's really easy for me to change, and we can make all those customizations already from there. But if it's a whole new, artwork that needs to be made, it's going to take time.
Wow, I think that's amazing. And yeah, and I find it really interesting that you went from, so I'm just kind of backtracking, but you went from a pastry chef to an a wedding invitation designer.
Yeah.
How did you think those two careers just end up like intersecting? Do
Yeah,
you
I mean,
feel like you still
honestly,
use some of your learnings?
oh yeah, for sure. Because honestly, it all comes from wedding industry is the way that they connect. Otherwise, it's like, what? So because I was already in the
Yeah.
wedding industry, in the pastry industry, that's how the connection is formed. But really, I mean, if I could stem it all back, it was all from Easter time. I was sitting there feeling so guilty because I was working on this cookie of like Peter Cottontail. I had this cute idea.
Mhm.
Peter Cottontail hopping down this little path holding Easter egg, or not Easter egg, Easter basket. And like you see his little tail and everything, he's hopping away. And I felt so bad for how long it took to make that cookie design. And I was absolutely in love with it, but I thought this design started with a sketch. Like this is all sketching, whether I end up on a cookie or whether I start, it started on a piece of paper, it started hand sketched. And so why can't I just take that skill and just perfect that skill and bring it to paper? And I did. And from there, it's even easier because now if I create a design, let's say Kailua, I create a Kailua design, more than one person's getting married in Kailua, right? So if somebody else likes it, then it's essentially a pre-made design for other people that they can purchase, and it's not going to cost them as much anymore now because it's no longer a custom design for them. So I found a way that I could make it work. And yes, it's a leap from pastry to there. And every now and then it's funny because, I taught so many people, so they still call me chef. And like, I still think of myself as a chef at heart. Like, I love going to fine dining or even like food trucks and getting desserts there. Like, I just love that whole element of it. So there's still always that war of like, but I'm a chef. But really it's like all chefs are artists, right? Like the ones that really care about presentation, they're all artists. So it's just a different medium, and it's the one that works for my life with my family. And that's really where the balance comes in and what I'm all about. So it works.
Wow, it's amazing. I love that story. And we do have these 4 questions that we ask all of our guests.
Okay.
And the first thing is, what is your favorite resource that you recommend for couples who are getting married or planning their wedding in Hawaii?
Oh man. I mean, honestly, my favorite resource is speaking with locals, right? I think that's the best way to find out about any area, especially if this is somewhere that they are not used to. If they can find anybody who's lived there, traveled there, eaten somewhere there, that's always a good place to start to get your best recommendations for things. But if you could find somebody in the industry and then ask them for a recommendation of vendors and whatnot, I think that's the perfect place to start. Otherwise, online searches, but like really being judicious on where you're getting your information from.
Yeah, definitely, especially when you're looking at it online.
Yeah.
And then, what do you think are some things that you like to do for fun, or some hobbies that you like to spend your time on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason I live in Hawaii and probably want to stay here forever because I am obsessed with the sun. I'm obsessed with water sports. It's always that way. We were living in Florida for a long time before we came out here. So kayaking is probably my favorite hobby of all time, but paddleboarding, honestly, just laying in my floaty on the water and playing with my son on the beach. Those are all my favorite things to do here. So pretty much any free time I have, you can find me out at the beach. I do like to go on hikes every now and then, but I'd say I'm a mild hiker here, like the safe hikes here as opposed to, the death-defying ones. But definitely beach time.
Yeah, definitely beach time. Well, you're in the right place.
Yeah, and then besides
you
that, I
mentioned
live
you
for
lived in
food and travel. Seems
yeah,
pretty obvious.
definitely. You mentioned you lived in Florida for a while.
Yeah, so I was in Florida for about 10 years. I used to work for Disney, and then my husband had been in the military, got out of the military, so we ended up moving to Tampa. So we were there for a good chunk of time, like 7 years or something. And then yeah, so we had like the boater's life. That's pretty much the difference. I mean, obviously the scenery. The scenery is very different from Florida to here. But the main difference on the water is boater's life. So we had jet ski and boat there and just spent all our time on the water that way.
Wow, that sounds great. I think that would have been like, I'm pretty sure. Like I have friends in Florida, and it seems like a great place as well, especially with Disney.
Yeah, I mean, I love Disney. I got to the point where I realized it was probably better to just buy the pass and go anytime I wanted as opposed to work there. I do love working there. I thought it was amazing, but it's just not good for family balance because it's really long hours. So yeah, we go to Disney all the time, and even now we still go about every 6 months to one of the parks. So it's definitely a favorite place.
Sounds great. And then, what do you believe is the reason that you do what you do as a wedding stationer?
I mean, the reason that I do it is just like that creative spark that I have. I think people who are in the creative fields all feel the same way, like they have to do something creative and they need to share it with people. And it, the fact that it can solve other people's issues for what they need, or just be this beautiful, beautiful thing that they can have as memento throughout their lives to look back on. It's like something so special to them. It's just a really wonderful thing. And then obviously, as I said earlier, the reason I do it is my son. My son changed everything, in my career, and all for the better. It's brought me so much more balance into my life and more time with him. And so it's just really special how all this developed out of, him being born, and everything changed from there. And it's like before that, I would have thought, I really can't even draw, which wasn't true because it was like I was drawing everything to be on a pastry, but I just never expanded on it and developed it. And now I've developed it into this, incredible thing.
Wow, that's amazing. And definitely encouraging, especially, I'm trying to learn to draw as well.
I do remember my students making fun of me at culinary school because we were talking about, like, I taught hospitality management classes too. And so one of the classes we had to talk about like fine dining table settings. And so I drew up on the board, I drew a plate and, knife, fork, spoon, all those kind of things. And I'm just doing it quickly because that's not the point, is to draw anything really nice. But I just drew little like pitchforks for the forks, and people were laughing. And I was like, okay, I can't draw, don't worry about it. But turns out I was wrong. They were wrong.
So was it just like a lot of practice?
No, it was just it was more so like just sitting down and taking more time to do it. Like I said, that one on the board was super quick drawing, and if I draw fast, even same thing. Like I have really beautiful handwriting, but if I do it fast, it looks awful, right? And so
It looks awful, yeah.
same thing with drawings. If you do it really fast, I mean, some artists are incredible and they can do really quick sketches because they've done them so many times. It's like muscle memory for them. But if you're just doing something unique really fast, it's not going to turn out as good as if you sit there and really dedicate the time to it. So I bet you can draw really well. You just gotta practice, build that skill, you'll get better at it.
Yeah, that really makes sense. And then for couples who are getting married and who may want to get in touch with you, how can they get a hold of you? How can they contact you?
Yeah, so you could call me directly through my number or email me. Those are usually the best ways to get a hold of me. Or, you could start from Instagram if you want to see some examples straight off the bat on Instagram. If you go through the links there, then there's a form specifically for stationery just to get the conversation started so we could get an appointment set up. But any of those means are really good.
What was your Instagram handle again?
Oh, it's pretty much my name, but it's at by Melissa Meyer.
Okay. So it's at by Melissa Meyer.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. And then before we close out the episode today, is there anything else you'd like to add, or is there anything else you'd like to share with our couples?
No, I think they have a lot of choices in what they do with stationery, and the only thing I would like to throw in there as somebody who lives in Hawaii is, try and consider sustainability a little bit. I know it sounds kind of like a conundrum because you're using paper products, but maybe stick to paper as much as you can, something that can be recycled as opposed to like if you're going to do the other printing methods, they do have to create a metal plate for it, or, there's a really big trend now. Yeah. It's kind of dying out, but there was a big trend the last few years of acrylic everything, acrylic menus, acrylic table numbers, whatnot, which looks pretty, but it's just terrible for the environment. And, like especially us getting out here and see sea turtles all the time. You see plastics wash up on the beach. I would try to urge people to be as sustainable as possible in those decisions. I know a lot of people even turn to like, we're not going to do a details card, we're going to do that online, or we're not going to do a response card, we're going to have people respond through our wedding website. Totally cool. I appreciate it, on the environmental impact side, and I think it's a great idea and it works.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Melissa. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Us. And and the information you shared was amazing. I believe it's even stuff that is pretty new to us, and it's something that I believe the couples will really find helpful.
Yeah, hopefully people get a lot of help from it and, help guide them in their decision. But when it comes down to it, do what works best for you. It's your wedding. Make the wedding about you. Put the elements in that you love, but do what works best for you.
All right. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching today's episode. That was Melissa Meyer. And if you'd like to reach out to her, if you'd like to contact her for your wedding stationery needs, you can find her Instagram at by Melissa Meyer, or visit our website at bymelissameyer.com. And if you're looking for wedding photography, or if you need more information or tips on planning your wedding, you can visit us at www.hnlstudios.com. And we encourage you to subscribe, like, and comment on our video below, just so you can be sure to not miss any future episodes or any future videos that we have. Thank you.